There is an answer to the nightmare of addiction. The Narconon Drug Rehabilitation Program. Narconon does not consider someone an addict for life. It does not regard addiction as a disease. Narconon is not a 12-step program, nor is it based on faith or belief.
The audio you're hearing has been taken from a video that can be found on the website of Narconon, an international drug rehabilitation provider with centres in over 40 countries around the world. The video shows the spacious and modern buildings in which Narconon centres are based and includes testimonials from those who went through the programme.
Other programs that I've been to where I felt depressed. I felt like I had to white knuckle every second of my sobriety. I don't feel like that anymore. I don't even think about drugs. It's not even part of the equation.
I don't have that little voice in the back of my head saying, hey, you're gonna use again. I don't have that anymore. And this place saved my life. Literally saved my life.
Reports began to emerge in December of 2017 that Narconon was planning to open their first centre in Ireland. The Meath Chronicle reported that Narconon had purchased the site of a former national school in the small town of Ballivor in County Meath. As soon as the news broke, resistance began to mount from locals. Meath councillor Noel French told me how the local community became aware of the issue.
The nursing home was vacant and for sale, and rumours started spreading in the area that Scientology were involved, and we had to investigate and try and find out. We discovered that Narconon had applied for planning permission to change the half-finished building from a nursing home to a drug rehabilitation facility.
Narconon is owned by the Association of Better Living and Education, which is itself owned by the Church of Scientology. On the Narconon website, no secret is made of the fact that its practices are based on the teachings of Scientology's founder, L. Ron Hubbard. And on Scientology.ie, Narconon is listed as a sponsored organisation. However, Narconon maintains that it is a secular organisation separate from Scientology. But it's not just the links to an organisation as controversial as Scientology that has many worried about Narconon's plans for Ballivor.
There is no medical supervision of Narconon facilities. It is not a medically approved system of taking people off drugs. For instance, they take people off cold turkey. There is no medical staff on the premises to deal with any emergencies.
The HSE agrees that Narconon is not backed up by medical evidence. A spokesperson from the National Drug Treatment Centre said Narconon had limited or no basis in a scientific understanding of human physiology and brain functioning and may potentially be harmful. I wanted to find out more. I wanted to know what makes Narconon a source of concern for so many, and I wanted to know what life was actually like inside a Narconon facility. So I thought it would be best to speak to someone who had been through the programme.
Hello?
Hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
This is David Love. David spent 5.5 months as a patient at Narconon Trois-Rivières, a facility that was located about an hour and a half's drive from Montreal in Quebec, Canada.
I heard about Narconon when I was in a detox center in Vancouver. I had been addicted to opiates as a result of back surgery, and I heard about it through a relative that was in Quebec City. I was sent an email regarding the success rate as being 76%. So I decided to fly from Vancouver to Montreal, Quebec, and go into their drug rehab program.
David says that treatment at the facility began with practices that are the same as those used in Scientology.
It starts right away. They'll have you sit there and in a chair, absolutely still, staring at another person who's doing the same. And you have to be able to do that for 10 minutes. You start at 2 minutes. And if you twitch or move or blink, they flunk you and you have to start over again. They'll have you walk over and touch a wall and turn around and walk back. They'll say, look around the room find something that is blue, and then when you point it out, they'll say thank you, and you repeat this over and over and over again.
And were you offered any explanation as to why you needed to do these particular tasks?
No, we weren't. You got to remember, we're still pretty fragile and vulnerable when we arrive there because we're just coming off of drugs. So you're not allowed to speak about your drug addiction. You're not allowed to speak about drugs, and it's forbidden to talk about Scientology.
The procedures that David describes here bear many similarities to core Scientology practices, specifically what are known as training routines. In Scientology, training routines are courses that are a key aspect of one's progression through Scientology. According to Scientologists, they are designed to improve awareness and communication. These routines are also sometimes called objectives or objective processes. On the Narconon website, these objectives are briefly mentioned, with it being stated that their function here is to bring one's attention off the past and into the present. This is in line with Narconon's claim that drug use leads people to become introverted and focused on the past. David says that once patients are done with these training routines, they then begin Narconon's detoxification process.
This is a very controversial treatment where you go into a sauna. I was in there 4.5 to 5 hours a day. I was in there for 25 or 26 days, I believe. And they give you what's called niacin and drug bombs, a lot of vitamins. And the niacin, which is recommended at only 50 milligrams by Health Canada as the maximum, they give you up to 5,000 milligrams of niacin. And it turns your body red. I was given up to 2,600.
It is this combination of long hours in a sauna and high doses of vitamins that has received the most attention from health authorities. The risks associated with high doses of niacin are of particular concern. Niacin is a form of vitamin B3 and is required as part of a healthy diet, but taking large amounts of it have been linked to health problems. According to the HSE, taking persistent high doses of some forms of niacin could lead to liver damage. Just like the initial training routines that David experienced, this detox process is also used as part of Scientology. To Scientologists, it is known as the Purification Rundown, a procedure which can be done at the Scientology Community Centre in Firhouse in Dublin. I spoke with former Scientologist Pete Griffiths about his experience doing the rundown.
I was asked, have you ever done the Purification Rundown? And I said, well, actually, I haven't. And it's like the guy just, his jaw dropped and said, oh, we'll have to get you on that right away. And that's how I ended up doing it. But I was told that basically because of my drug taking past, which wasn't extensive, I wasn't a druggie by any means, but like a lot of people, I sampled this and sampled that, and that was put down as the reason for my difficulties. And if I just did the Purification Rundown, it would solve those problems. You were to begin the program with a regimen of exercise, and the purpose of that was to get the blood pumping so that the vitamins would have more effect. Then you're given a cupful or a handful, depending on who was giving it you, of different vitamins. You had no idea what they were. They could be anything. I mean, they were just the standard vitamins, A, B, C, and so on. And then you're supposed to take those and then go into the sauna and spend 5 or 6 hours in the sauna.
In Narconon terminology, the Purification Rundown is known as the New Life Detox, and on their website, Narconon outlined their reasoning for how it works.
It is based on the discovery that drug residues apparently remain trapped in the body's fatty tissues. These residues can be released back into the system, causing a person to re-experience the effects of drugs, even years after taking them. The New Life Detox was developed expressly for people who have used drugs and designed to purge the drug residues from the body, and so end their negative effects.
Of course, critics of Narconon dispute the validity of these claims. I was unable to find any evidence in favour of them on the Narconon website. In my own research, I discovered that the current scientific understanding is that some drugs can be absorbed into fat in the body. However, the amounts are so small that it is unlikely to have any noticeable effect, and it is also unlikely that any drug could stay in the body long enough to be felt years later. Critics of Narconon say that this understanding can lead to the possibility of mistaking dangerous symptoms for simply being the effects of drugs as they are released from the body during the new life detox. For example, withdrawal from alcohol can cause seizures and hallucinations, and if not treated properly could lead to death. But under Narconon's understanding, these symptoms could possibly be interpreted as the re-experiencing of drugs taken in the past. And there are other possible dangers from Narconon's understanding of drugs. Narconon makes much of the fact that they offer a drug-free withdrawal program. However, similarly to the Church of Scientology, Narconon's definition of dangerous drugs seems to include many prescribed medications. While talking with David Love, he told me of several times he witnessed Narconon staff refusing to give patients their prescribed medication, including a time in which a patient was refused their insulin and had to be hospitalised, resulting in them being in a coma for 3 days. Furthermore, David said there were no medical professionals working at the facility during his time there. This was a factor that has been cited in cases where Narconon facilities have been shut down. Critics have also accused the lack of medical training among staff as a factor in several deaths which have occurred at Narconon facilities around the world. This could be due to Narconon's alleged practice of recruiting patients as staff members, something which David experienced firsthand. After 5.5 months of treatment at the facility, he began to work there.
They started grooming me probably about a month before I was hired onto staff. So, what they do is they start talking to you about saving lives and improving the planet and saving the planet. And really, when you have no money left or any at all, how are you going to get home? You have to earn money. So that's why I basically took a position there. And I did really want to help people. I thought, I could help people.
David said that this lack of money among patients not only encouraged them to work at the facility, but also prevented them from leaving at all. He took issue with the Taoiseach's claim that those who use Narconon do so of their own free will.
This is, of course, nonetheless a free country which guarantees free association to people and citizens. So I'm not sure if there is anything that government can do if they have planning permission for the centre. And certainly if people are there by free will, by their own decision, and are not being detained there against their will.
However, when we arrived at Narconon in Quebec, all our identification was taken away, our passports, our driver licenses, our ID, and our bank cards. So you weren't free to leave. And the health agency in Quebec noted this as another reason why they shut them down.
Mm-hmm. And if people attempted to leave, were there attempts made to stop them?
Yes. If they were walking down the road to leave, they would go after them in a car. And basically, they didn't grab them and force them in the car, but they would convince them to come back. But you were free to walk off the grounds and run away, but you have no money, you're in a foreign land. I was, thousands of miles away, and most people were coming from many thousands of miles away, other countries, Turkey, Iran, everywhere. So you have no passport, you have no identification, and no money. What are you going to do?
Are you allowed any ability to contact relatives or friends to come collect you or anything like that?
Yes, you are, and that happens on several occasions, not just at Narconon in Canada, but other Narconons. When the patient would call home and say, "Mom, Dad, you've got to get me out of this place. This is a cult or a con job," the ethics officer or one of the staff members would call the parent and basically say, "This is normal. This happens all the time. Just give us more time and let him continue on in the program, and he's going to be just fine." And then the parent would say, "Okay, just keep going."
When I spoke with former Scientologist Pete Griffiths, he speculated that Narconon chose the small town of Ballivor in Meath for their new facility because they deliberately seek isolated locations in order to deter patients from leaving. I asked David if this was his experience at Narconon Trois-Rivières.
Oh, absolutely. This is what they do. It's a small town, and it was quite remote. And I think Pete is very right there that they do put it remote. It does deter people from leaving, but it's also very dangerous in doing that because for a medical emergency, it takes longer for medical personnel, and ambulances to respond to a call.
However, David did eventually leave Narconon after working there for 6 months. He says that his experiences as a staff member were what led him to finally want to leave.
I was on post as a graduate officer, and the graduate officer is the person that talks to the people once they graduate the program and help them reintegrate back into society by going home, and I help them make arrangements to travel back home. And I also was in control of calculating the statistics of the success rates. And when I was looking in the files and calculating the success rates, contacting the people that had left Narconon, I found that the success rate was a fraud. And as I looked at more documents, I thought this is crazy, and it was a lie basically. So I really didn't notice that it was such a sham and lie until I was on staff. And at the end, I was in contact with the person from that worked for the federal government, and I was picked up after it was dark and taken away and hidden away in a motel room for 3 nights. And then the SQ Quebec Intelligence Police picked me up for 2 interviews about what was going on there.
After David left the facility, Narconon Trois-Rivières was shut down by health authorities in Quebec, partly because of David's efforts. He brought a complaint against the facility to the Quebec Human Rights Commission, along with 2 other complainants. The commission determined that Narconon had made several rights violations. Narconon offered compensation as a result of this decision. However, it was on the condition that the complainants sign a non-disclosure agreement. Because David wanted to be able to speak and write about his experiences at the facility, he refused the money. He also brought a complaint to the Quebec Labour Board, stating that Narconon owed him money from his time as an employee at the facility, which they eventually agreed to pay to him. According to David, the negative effects of his time at Narconon did not end when he left the facility. He claims he faced harassment from Narconon and was even diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of the experiences he had while under their care. David believes Narconon has little hope of opening another facility in Canada due to regulations that are in place governing rehabilitation programs. In Ireland, however, there is currently no regulation of addiction treatment providers. This means there is nothing stopping any private entity, such as Narconon, opening a facility here regardless of any lack of approval by the medical community. However, the campaign against Narconon from the local community in Ballivor has led to increased interest in bringing in regulation in this area. A Sinn Féin TD from the Meath West constituency by the name of Peadar Tobin has been pushing for legislation to address this issue. He told me about the meeting he had with Catherine Byrne, Minister for State with responsibility for the National Drugs Strategy.
I really put it to her that it was important that the government took a hold of this. And the reason being is because Catherine Byrne has at her disposal a department and drafters of legislation with massive experience in this space. And the reason we wanted her to do it is because obviously if her department is to proceed in this manner, it would typically be more comprehensive, more foolproof, and more cautious as well. There's a danger here, and that is there are good organizations operating in this space who are operating as private organizations, maybe churches or charities, etc., doing good work, and they're not funded by the state, and therefore they're not regulated. Now, we don't want to in any way negatively affect their actions. We want them to be able to function as well. Now, if Catherine Byrne comes back and says that her department is not going to legislate in this issue, we've already started to do the research on it. And there's a couple of things that can be done in my view. One is there are minimum standards in this area for organisations that are functioning on the basis of some funding from the HSE. So we want to include those minimum standards right across the area. Also, HICWA currently have a function in inspecting these types of locations for nursing homes and hospitals, etc. And the logic would dictate that this sector would be included under HICWA. And then there's also an element that we're looking at. It's proving difficult to hammer down at the moment, but really that there would be some medical qualifications on site in the delivery of these types of services. And we have to try and work out what they should be and to build that into legislation. I would be giving the Minister till the end of April. And if the Minister hasn't got a firm commitment to produce immediate legislation by the end of April, our instinct would be that we would proceed then and hopefully have legislation submitted into the Dáil before the summer recess so that it could be completed in the second half of the year. Now, of course, people might say, well, Narconon have the objective of setting up this in May. But, if I were an investor in Narconon and they're putting big money into this, they need to realise that if they do it, put the money in, there will be regulation in this space at the end of the year, which may well close them, which may well nullify their investment. So they should be, thinking twice and long and hard about proceeding with this investment.
During the making of this report, Narconon confirmed their intentions to open the facility in Ballivor. Narconon had previously remained silent about their plans in Ireland. Now they say they are going ahead with the opening and have begun reaching out to members of the local community to assuage their fears. In a press release, they said the facility is a multi-million euro project which will be worth around €850,000 per year to the local community, as well as providing 6 full-time jobs to local residents. Efforts were made by Dublin South FM to reach out to both Narconon and the Church of Scientology for comment, but no response was received. We may not know how local resistance or the warnings of Pater Tobin are impacting Narconon's plans for Ballivor, but it seems likely that this story will only intensify as the facility moves closer to becoming a reality, and those fighting against it say they have no intention of giving up anytime soon.
Bring it up!